Welcome to the 100th anniversary of the Silver King Mine, Nelson, British Columbia. 100 years ago, in October 1886, a party of prospectors from Colville County, Washington, accidentally stumbled across an outcrop of gleaming copper-silver ore on Toad Mountain. This became the famous Silver King Mine and sowed the seeds for the development of Nelson. The story of the Silver King is full of the stuff of a great strike. Fortunes made and lost, courage, greed, and legend, but it is also the story of hardship, accident, and bitter conflict. It was the crop failure south of the border in Colville County in 1886 that forced many people to head north and try their luck prospecting. A party of 15, led by Winslow and Ozma Hall, set out to placer mine along the Salmon River. Having cut nearly 100 miles of trail, their food supply diminishing and winter approaching, the group were becoming very dejected. Then accidentally, a couple of them wound up on Toad Mountain hunting and stumbled across an outcrop of gleaming ore. In great excitement, the group gathered rock samples and returned to Colville for the winter. Assays of the rock revealed a copper-silver deposit rich in silver content. The group began to make preparations to return to Toad Mountain the following spring. As news of the fabulous silver find leaked out, hordes of prospectors followed the Hall party, hoping to strike lucky and make a fortune. Transportation was very primitive in those days: pack train, canoe, or foot. Machinery was dragged up the mountainside. Timber was cut to build mine shafts and rough shelter for the men. Food was obtained by hunting and fishing. The Silver King was ready for production in 1888. However, a major obstacle needed to be overcome: the smelting of the ore. The ore was laid in raw cowhides, laced up and dragged by horses down the mountain, a technique known as rawhiding. It was loaded onto barges and towed down the Kootenay River to Bonner's Ferry. Then it was transported by railroad and wagon all the way to the smelter in Butte, Montana, several hundred miles away. Mining was a tough and dangerous job, and in the early days was carried out predominantly by hand. The miners would hammer steel rods into the rock face, pack the holes with dynamite, and blast the ore free. There was no safety clothes or equipment, and the only light underground was provided by the candles worn in the miners' hats. When the Silver King was discovered, the Kootenays were extremely isolated. One log cabin, belonging to Arthur Bunting, stood on the present-day site of Nelson. After the Great Strike, between 300 and 400 people camped in shanties along Ward Creek. The town of Nelson grew quickly as businesses and shops sprang up to serve the mining community, and the people of Nelson began to demand better transportation links to the rest of the province. In 1890, a 13-mile wagon road was built to link the Hall mines with Nelson, and pack trains replaced rawhiding to transport supplies up the mountain and ore down. In 1891, the Columbia and Kootenay Steam Navigation Company completed a 28-mile railroad linking Sproats Landing, present-day Robson, with Nelson, and the first steam engine chugged into the town. That same year, the stern-wheeler, the SS Nelson, which was built in Nelson, was proudly launched on Kootenay Lake. These transportation routes promoted trading and communication opportunities for the people of Nelson and provided greater accessibility to other smelters in the United States. The early years at the Silver King were hampered by a lack of money. After a great deal of effort, the manager, John MacDonald, found a buyer. The Hall Mines Company of London, England, paid the handsome sum of $1 million to the original owners. The people of Nelson were greatly excited at the prospect of the Silver King being fully developed. During the spring of 1894, modern machinery arrived at the mine. powered drills run by large air compressors, diamond drills to obtain rock cores, and ore crushing plant. Extensive development of the ore bodies commenced. In addition to the mine, there was a blacksmith's shop and an assay office. Furthermore, preparations were made for a smelter to be built in Nelson and for an aerial tramway linking the Silver King to the proposed smelter. Construction of an aerial tramway to simplify the transportation of ore down Toad Mountain had been a dream for a long time, and in October 1895, the last splice was made in the cable. The tramway resembled a modern ski lift. Ore was loaded down a chute at the mine and transported in one of the 875 buckets that were carried along the 4.5 mile long cable that spanned an elevation of 4,500 feet between the Silver King and Nelson. The clatter and clanging of the tramway resounded day and night and kept many a person awake during the night. Eventually, the tramway was divided into two sections, and a halfway station was set up near Give Out Creek. The high cost of transporting ore to American smelters was a major factor in the proposal to construct a smelter on the present-day site of Rosemont. On January the 14th, 1896, the 100-ton smelter was blown in, and the large chimney belching smoke became a distinctive landmark across the town. During the smelting process, the ore was heated to a high temperature, and the heavy metal was eventually drained into large matte molds to be later crushed and bagged for export. 7 tons of Silver King ore were reduced to 1 ton of matte, containing 300 ounces of silver and half an ounce of gold. Unfortunately, a decline in output at the Silver King mine and competition from the smelter in Trail forced its closure in 1907. Then a few years later, Nelson witnessed an enormous fire when the smelter burned down, one of a series of fires in Nelson lit by the legendary firebug. During the heyday of the Silver King, rough shelters on Toad Mountain were gradually replaced by sturdier cabins as families moved up the mountain to join the men at the mines, and a settlement called Frederickson grew up. Living conditions were very basic. Provisions came up by pack train or in the tramway buckets during heavy snowfall. The Hall Mines Company built a splendid boarding house to accommodate 300 men. But Nelson was a long wagon road journey away, and visits were restricted to special events. Working hours were long and entertainment sparse. The community died when operations at the mine gradually wound down, and today old timbers and remnants of household goods remain as reminders of the community that once lived at Toad Mountain. Silver and gold rushes conjure up visions of great excitement, but the reality was a little different. A miner's life was hard. Underground conditions were dangerous, and many men died in rockfalls and dynamite explosions. The early drills that the men used were nicknamed the Widowmaker, because the dust particles that came off from the rock accumulated in the men's lungs, and many of them died of silicosis. In addition, the miners were also at the mercy of fluctuating metal prices, and it was a combination of these factors that led to the development of miners' unions. In 1899, a bitter strike broke out over the right to work 8 hours instead of 10 in the underground mines. And on May the 27th, 1899, the Nelson Miners Union was formed. This is the Nelson Miners Union membership card and the badge that the miners wore. Justice to all, in union there is strength. On the back of the badge, the signature that was worn when the men went to funerals of their friends. The strike ended 1 year later when the Mine Association gave in, but the miners had to take a pay cut. By 1900, the famous Silver King mine was facing serious problems: a depletion in ore, introduction of tariffs by the United States, competition from the Klondike Gold Rush, the introduction of the 8-hour day, and the rise to prominence of the smelter-in trail. Large-scale operations at the mine ceased after 1902, although intermittent operations continued until the outbreak of war in 1914. Since that time, there have been periodic attempts to re-mine the Silver King, as smelting techniques have improved and the price of metals has risen high enough. Prospecting continues in the area today, so who knows, maybe the Silver King mine isn't dead yet.